we based our main studies around permaculture. And the definition of permaculture is the development of agricultural ecosystems intended to be sustainable and self-sufficient. And so it's pretty much like strategic farming, I guess, like more thought out. So our final project was to create a permaculture design for our own properties. And so this is my final design here, and my goal was to have as much perennial crops and fruit trees as possible. So this is so we have access to the food if we're interested in harvesting it from the trees, but if we choose not to harvest it, it will continue to grow in the years afterwards. So before I get into this, there was some planning we had to do before this. So first we had to make zone and sector maps. So this is a zone map. The zones are, zone 0 is the house, zone 1 is the area around the house that has a lot of human interaction. Zone 2 is where perennial plants are growing, and we don't really have any of those on our property, so that's not on there. Zone 3 is where main crops are grown, and we also don't have that, so that's not on there. Zone 4 is a semi-wild area that is used for foraging, but we also don't have. And then Zone 5 is just wilderness, where no one really interacts with the landscape there. And then sectors, this one is kind of confusing, but the sectors are pretty much wind, sunlight, foot traffic, shade, and water flow. So I have all of that on here. The purple is shade, the blue is water, the green is wind, the yellow, which is really hard to see, is sunlight, and the brown is foot traffic. So onto this, we had to come up with a minimum and maximum design for our properties, minimum being like the least amount of permaculture, I guess, that you would do on your property, and the maximum being its maximum potential. So the minimum design for my property is, we have some apple trees like right there, so to harvest the apples from those and then possibly grow small plants on the deck right there. And then the maximum design is to have this as an orchard with a chicken coop in there, and then chickens there, so when the fruit falls, or have a fenced off area around the orchard, so when the fruit falls, the chickens will eat the fruit and then fertilize the ground with their poop, fertilize the trees. And then right here, I have a big raspberry patch that is just used for getting raspberries. So if we want them, we can harvest them. If not, it'll still grow. And then over here, having an orchard with apple trees and apricot trees. And then under the trees, plant a plant called hopness, which is a perennial plant, and it's a nitrogen fixer that grows like tubers that are edible. And then over in this field, having another perennial grain or perennial plant that we can harvest if we choose, like hotness or artichokes or potatoes, or not artichoke, onions or asparagus, because those both grow in Colorado. Making this design, I tried to mimic guilds a little bit, and guilds are groups of plants or animals that are in an area that complement each other and help each other out. So I tried to do that here and there with the chickens. And then I also just put a greenhouse because it's really sunny in this part of the yard and there's no shade. So that would be able to produce food year-round because it would stay warm in the winter. So, for this, we read the book Animal Vegetable Miracle, which is by Barbara Kingsolver. And in her book, her and her family moved from Tucson, Arizona to a farm in the Appalachian Mountains, where they decided to challenge themselves to eat only local food for an entire family local food that they had grown on their farm or that had been grown in the local area. And it sounds hard, but reading about her story and everything, it didn't sound that hard actually at the end, as long as you have like the right resources. And so local food, like our family likes local food and stuff, but price is an issue because it's always more expensive. So this design would be good because we could get eggs from the chickens and then fruit from the orchard and stuff for free, which is cool. So this semester we also spent a lot of time studying topics, we also spent a lot of time studying topics that relate to permaculture and science. So in my design, I tried to mimic the topics of photosynthesis, the nitrogen cycle, native species, and cellular respiration. Photosynthesis is when plants take energy from the sun along with water and carbon dioxide, and they turn it into glucose or plant sugar, which they use to feed themselves. And this is obviously mimicking the design because all plants use photosynthesis every day. So next is the nitrogen cycle, which is the natural way that nitrogen cycles through plants, animals, soil, and the atmosphere. So plants will suck nitrogen into them through their roots, and then when an animal eats those plants and it poops them out or dies and decomposes, the nitrogen will go back into the soil. And then there's some nitrogen in the atmosphere, which is sucked into the soil by bacteria that will then release that back into the soil. I incorporated this by planting nitrogen-fixing plants in here where the fruit trees are, because fruit trees use a lot of nitrogen and they don't put it back into the soil. So nitrogen-fixing plants will restore the balance of the soil in that area. And the two I would plant in there are, like I said, the hopness for their tubers, and then mountain avens, which is a perennial nitrogen fixer that has flowers and stuff, so it'll look nice. And then native species is displayed because species that aren't native to Colorado will probably not survive in the extreme heat and dryness that happens in the summer. So I had to find species that could withstand the extreme heat and it would die. And two of these species that I found were onion and asparagus that I would incorporate somewhere in there. And then lastly, cellular respiration is, plants don't use cellular respiration very much, but humans and animals do, and it's us taking glucose from the plants and turning it back into ATP, which is used for energy, like that's what gives us our energy. And this is obviously displayed because all humans and animals do it every day, so the chickens and we do it. So, yeah, any questions?
Who's got questions for Everest? Can you tell us a little bit about tubers?
Tubers? They're kind of like potatoes. They're like really starchy, edible like roots that grow off of certain plants.
Great. I think you're the only one who mentions tubers in their design. What other questions do we have for Everest?
So in your design, there's a lot of open spaces that is like lawn.
Oh yeah, it's kind of like actual like tall grass in it, and it's really, really sunny and dry, so it'd be hard for things to grow on this part of the field.
Will leaving wild, does it benefit your design in any ways?
But
So by leaving that area wild, does it benefit your design in any ways?
it doesn't benefit it, but I just chose not to do anything there because that's like the driest, sunniest part of the property, and I doubt any plants would make it living there unless it rained a lot, because the yard doesn't get much water other than rain.
And can you tell us your design goal one more time and a brief summary of how the elements within your design reach that goal?
The goal for my design is to have as much perennial crops and fruit trees as possible, so that if we choose to harvest the fruit and food, we have that. But if we choose not to harvest that, it'll still grow next year, and we don't have to put much effort into it. And this mimics it because we have chickens, which are the only thing that actually need feeding. But then we get eggs from those. And then we have the raspberries that will grow year-round if we choose to harvest them. And if we don't choose to harvest them, we'll come back next year. And then same with the perennials and the fruit trees. Those will obviously come back. So, yeah.
Do the raspberries, what are their functions? There are multiple functions within the design?
They don't really have a function, they're just there, so if we want them.
Is there a way we can connect them into the design? Do we have multiple functions?
Maybe, I don't know if they're nitrogen fixers or anything, but yeah, I don't know, I didn't do much planning on that, I just put them there because it seemed like a good spot to have something.
Other questions we've got for Everest?
How would you say that the places we visited and guest speaker influenced how you planned your design?
The greenhouse was influenced by Crimpy because I didn't, I don't know, I wasn't planning on putting a greenhouse in, but after seeing Crimpy's tropical greenhouses that were growing food, they were growing like bananas and avocados in the middle of winter, that made me want to be able to do that. And Crimpy, if you don't know, is Central Rocky Mountain Permaculture Institute, which we visited, and they are up in the mountains of basalt, and they're like trying to be completely self-sustainable in growing food, and they have a lot of food growing, and they, like I said, have those tropical greenhouses, which I thought were really neat, and I wanted to somehow incorporate that into my design.
All right, well, thank you, Everest.